We'll see how Rumble's they don't have a static stream key for us, or under-delivered promises. Wonderful platform that loves law legitimacy.
Hey, good morning. We're creeping back into action after a long weekend, or maybe it wasn't long. Maybe it only felt long because I had to return to work from vacation. So, I come home, the coffee machine's broken. I can't get the internet to work. I have to use the hotspot on my phone, but at least the cat still loves me. And, I'm heading into the office soon, and God only knows what chaos awaits me there. We're going to chat a little bit off topic, so to speak, before we move into today's topics, because we're waiting for Rumble to catch up with us. Apparently, the Rumble stream is quick to announce its presence, slow to engage, and we're trying to figure out why our Rumble numbers are low. Mike, where are we in terms of the fantasy football league? Do we have a full subscription now? How many teams are we going to have? When is the draft? That's what inquiring minds.
Yeah, that's going to be the big thing. So you and I will talk about what date is going to be good for the draft, whether we want to do it during the middle of the week or on a weekend. But we have a field. Everybody who has sent me an email, I have seen it. If I have not responded, please do not fret. I did respond to one person who just asked for confirmation, but I'll aggregate all that stuff this afternoon, and then we will begin scheduling stuff out, getting everybody invited to the right platform. We've still got to decide whether we want to do perhaps ESPN or Sleeper or whatever, but we're not going to make anybody else privy to that information. We're just going to do it.
All right. Well, let's start. Let's just move into the topic. I'm tired of waiting on Rumble. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. There was an article a couple of weeks ago that took the nation by storm. A University of Pennsylvania law review article that isn't due to be published until 2024, but it served the partisan winds to have it out early. So it was published on the Social Science Research Network, and then apparently shopped around to editorial boards of major newspapers. And it pertains to the disqualification clause of the 14th Amendment. And basically it says that any person who's engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the United States or offered aid and comfort to those who have is disqualified if they previously taken an oath to support the Constitution. They're disqualified from running for office in the future. And the authors suggested boldly that this was a self-enforcing, self-executing, as it were, provision of the Constitution, that upon a conclusion that a person had engaged in insurrection or rebellion, or upon a conclusion that a person had aided and comforted those who had, a state officer was obliged to enforce the Constitution and say to a person, you can't run. And the practical consequence of this would be on the state level, members of secretaries of state offices or electoral officials refusing to place a candidate on the ballot if in the state actor's mind that candidate had engaged in insurrection, rebellion, or offering aid and comfort to those who had. And you're thinking, why would they write such an article? Well, what could this possibly pertain to in this, the most fractious of all possible domestic worlds, short of a civil war? Well, of course, it's Donald Trump. And at the end, they note that. They say they believe that Trump is disqualified because of his behavior while in office and thereafter, as relates to the 2020 election, in particular the January 6th event at the Capitol, and his, meaning Trump's, perpetual efforts to have the election declared a fraud. And they make a historical argument, and they make good arguments. It's not an irresponsible piece of literature. One of the arguments is, look, there are plenty of clauses in the Constitution that are self-effectuating. For example, Mike Boyer is ineligible to be president of the United States. Why? Because he's 33 years old. The Constitution says you've got to be 35. Mike turns up with his baby face and cherubic good looks to the Secretary of State's office with the requisite number of signatures. Put me on the ballot. How old are you, sir? I'm 33 years old. I'm sorry, I cannot do that. Okay, now that is a self-effectuating clause of the Constitution. If Mike thought that he wanted to be president and that 35-year-old limit was unconstitutional, he could then bring an action in court, and the courts would probably dispense with his action summarily. That's different. And, you know, when I kept an open mind on this, it's a 126-page law review. It's immaculately researched. It's a pleasure to read. Great footnotes. I learned a lot reading it. And I thought, that's interesting, but it's going to yield chaos. The more I've thought about it, however, the more uneasy I've become by that conclusion. And that is because we have some notion of process in this country. There has to be some reliable factual predicate on which a state actor could act to determine that a person had been engaged in insurrection, rebellion, or offering aid and comfort to those. There'd have to be the functional equivalent of a birth certificate. And what is a birth certificate? A birth certificate is a hearsay document. And you're like, huh? Does that mean I can't rely on my birth certificate? No, there's an exception to the hearsay rule. The hearsay rule basically says that you cannot use an out-of-court statement in a court proceeding or an adjudicative proceeding to which the rules apply to prove the truth of the matter asserted therein. For example, fire, she screamed. Well, does that prove there was a fire? No, but it sheds light on her state of mind, and her state of mind was such that she believed there was a fire, and that may be circumstantial evidence that there was a fire. Your birth certificate. If I ask you, what day were you born? You're not offering me that evidence based on memory. I guarantee it. You're offering it based on ancient records. You're offering it based on public records. You're offering it based on statements you've made to a treating physician. You're offering it from any of a number of sources that have assumed a position of reality in your mind. And so now it's accepted that your birth date is real. And all of those procedures, those doctrines, public records, you can get a certified copy of the thing, ancient records, you go to your family Bible, you're in there, these are hearsay substitutes. And so hearsay substitutes suggest that when the most reliable evidence of a thing is evidence. A person says, I saw it, I heard it, I read it. Maybe not I read it, but I read it and it had an impact on me. These are direct evidence of the state of mind of the person who's testified. There are all sorts of things that we rely upon that aren't that form, and one of them is dates of birth. And so there are hearsay exceptions to the bar on hearsay evidence. Also, there are adjudicatory proceedings that make fact findings where things are tested and we can rely on the judgments. At the conclusion of a civil war, the Civil War in the United States, which led to the creation of the 14th Amendment, there was a peace treaty. Hostilities ended. The parties agreed to settle their differences in a formal proceeding, the making of the surrender at Appomattox and the incidents thereafter. I'm just not sure that I want my town clerk deciding over her cup of coffee as I wander in with my petition that I was engaging in rebellion, or that because I've represented January 6th defendants, hey, I've offered them aid and comfort. Now, I've done so in a legal proceeding, and that may be a reason to forgive my offering them aid and comfort, but that's the point. There was a legal proceeding. So I see a cascade of support for the notion that the self-effectuating character of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment should lead clerks to reject Trump petitions to be placed on ballots in 2024. Not so fast, I say. I think that while the Constitution does speak of disqualifying people who participated in events, I don't think it gave to local officials the ability to decide on their own, absent any adjudicatory finding that a person had done so, especially when it becomes to that clause on offering aid and comfort. In that case, every political adversary is going to be deemed disqualified, and the burden is going to shift to them to get their names on the ballot by going to a court to challenge the local official's assessment. So let's put a little bit of cold water on that fire, or let's derail or take a wheel off the cart on the bandwagon that has everybody deciding that the clerks should decide who the candidate should be in 2024.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's going to be many people who watch and listen to this stream, Norm, that are delighted to hear the cold water here, metaphorically speaking, because when we first covered this, I think that there was the interest was the fact that there was a paper published on this exact topic, right? And then there was, I think, rightfully so, some concern as to the timing of when that was published, but you addressed that most directly and said, you have to do it before it becomes moot, right? We're on the heels of, one of the hotly contested elections of our generation, and then we're heading into 24, which is going to be another mess when we get there. But I think that from a due process perspective, we know that in the court of public opinion, Trump has been convicted, right? Broadly on the left. And that is, I think, what makes people concerned about the availability of the legal argument that we're talking about. Because what we know after 3 failed impeachment attempts, countless charges stemming from 4 separate indictments, Vivek Ramaswamy went on record as saying that not only was the 2020 election the victim of election integrity issues pursuant to big tech censorship, et cetera, but he feels strongly that 2016's election was stolen from Donald Trump because of the lawfare and because of the procedural onslaught that he was hit with during his entire presidency that precluded him from governing. I think that when I look at something like Article 3 or Section 3 of the 14th Amendment and what is being proposed by and through that, and Dawn's right, some clerks will try it anyway, but I think that's my point, right? Is that I think that the overwhelming fear on the political right from Trump supporters and even those that are adjacent via some other candidate, but still recognize that Trump is the best prospect that the conservatives have as president right now. And we could talk about Vivek in a moment. I do believe that the eventual success of a legal argument coming from the left is not in the cards. It's not a factor that is considered when they bring it, because part of the cumulative weight of the strategy of delegitimizing Trump, that is the point, right? Add that to the mix.
So, and if you need to look no further to test the legitimacy of this concept, then who was the clerk? Was it in Tennessee who refused to issue marriage licenses to gays after the Supreme Court concluded that gay marriage was constitutional? She said, "Well, no, that's not how I read the Constitution." And I think we want the courts reading the Constitution. We don't want clerks doing so. They have what's called a ministerial function. Rules are established. They are determined to determine compliance with the rules, and those rules aren't typically constitutional in character. And so, I mean, in an effort to derail the great populist, we've made a nation of clerks as quasi Supreme Court justices. And I think we need to have some pushback on this. My thoughts are still evolving on the article. I just, over the weekend, I was looking at some coverage of this article in various publications, thinking, man, this just has to slow down. On the topic of reading, I had a long drive yesterday from northern Vermont back into southern Connecticut, and I was listening to Vivek, one of Vivek Ramaswamy's new book, A Nation of Victims. And I decided that I'm just going to go all in on Ramaswamy in 2024 as president. And why do I say that? Given the alternative, having to vote Biden versus Trump, sure, I'll vote Trump. I doubt he'll win. But I'd vote Trump as a great protest vote. My view is I don't want to be governed. I don't like the public health state agenda. I don't want others telling me what's in my own welfare. And I gather that I look at Trump as a sort of last gasp of individualism. The argument that the individual is real and the state is an artifice, and that the state has to be harnessed to serve the purposes of individuals, not vice versa. Sure, I get it. But Trump's 77 years old. If he runs and wins or runs and loses this time, this may be his last candidacy. Maybe he'll have one more in him if he's extraordinarily vigorous. The point is, the nation will live beyond Trump. Oh, it's true. I mean, I know there are some of you out there, Trump forever, Trump or never. Trump is going to save the world. I don't think so. I mean, I think I'm sort of tired of the reality TV version of The Apprentice in the form of Donald Trump telling everybody who disagrees with him they're fired, they're fat, they're ugly, they're stupid, they're this, they're that. We may all all be all of those things. But in Vivek Ramaswamy, I heard a voice that was engaged with the nation's intellectual tradition. I heard the voice of a lawyer who, and I don't always agree with what he said. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But I heard the voice of a young man who's gone through law school, struggled with the scope and contours of our institution. You know, I'm aware of those who say, hey, he's a hedge fund guy, he's a fraud, he's one of them, you can't trust him. Well, you know, if that's the standard, we can't trust Trump either because he's one of them, one of the television elite, the entertainers. I mean, this you can't trust a person because of where they've been. That's just another version of identity politics. Trust a person, you know, listen to what a person has to say and ask yourself, does this person have the capacity to form a vision for the future? So I was listening to the book and I made the mistake, Mike tells me, of regarding this as a campaign book. Apparently Ramaswamy wrote the book without thinking that he was going to run for president. I'm not sure I accept that.
Books that he's published, because he
Yeah,
published them within 18 months.
I'm not sure I accept that either, that he didn't know he was going to run. He was certainly testing the waters and he wanted to see how his ideas would be received. And the books are not matters of literature. In other words, they're not beautifully written. They give off the sound of having been dictated and edited on the fly by a guy who's very busy. But give him credit for trying. And so in Nation of Victims, one of the things he says is, you know, as a matter of constitutional law, the nation took a wrong course. And I'm not sure I disagree that we took a wrong course, but I'm not sure I agree with his analysis. And that is when the 14th Amendment was passed, it said that no citizen shall be deprived of the privileges and immunities of citizenship. And it also said that all persons shall be treated equally. These are two great clauses in the 14th Amendment, the Privileges and Immunities Clause and the Equal Protection Clause. Ramaswamy says, hey, in the slaughterhouse cases, the Privilege and Immunities Clause, and these are 1870s cases, were declared dead letters. The Supreme Court decided to ignore that language and instead focused on equal protection. And in so doing, they created an incentive, the courts did, for victimhood. And it's a little bit of a reach in my mind on Ramaswamy's part. He's very critical, and I think he's right, of the standard of review discussion. It started with footnote 4 of the Caroline Products decision in the 1930s. That's the decision that created a rational basis of review as a means of, as a standard for evaluating congressional acts. If Congress had reasons, the act passes muster. But in footnote 4, the court said, well, there may be discrete and insular minorities that are entitled to special or stricter scrutiny. And the result is we now have several suspect classes that when the government acts, the courts react by looking at the action, not on the basis of whether it was rational, but under strict scrutiny. And Ramaswamy says, you know, and I'm referring to color, I'm referring to alienage, you know, your status as an alien, I'm referring to national origins. Women have a different position. They have so-called heightened scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny. And Ramaswamy rightly says, you know, where did all this stuff come from? Is this more than constitutional gibberish? And at that moment, I fell in love with him because I remembered almost failing my con law exam, final exam in law school when I took on this standard of review topic and said, this is all a bunch of nonsense. It's got nothing to do with what the founders had. It's a confusing judicial gloss that adds a lot of garbage to the Constitution and no clarity to people's rights. And I thought, my God, maybe I should have got an A on that exam. If Professor Ramaswamy was grading it, I might have. But where I think he's wrong is I'm not sure that the same problems that he seems to lay off on ignoring the Privilege and Immunities Clause wouldn't occur if we had gone that way rather than the Equal Protection Clause. And I need to hear more from him on that. So, you know, if one of Vivek's people are listening to this, please get him on the show because I think we're all, at least I am. I don't know. Mike's got to make up his own mind. I'm all in on Ramaswamy in 2024, and the reason I am is he's an intellectual. He's engaged with the nation's history and traditions. He's looking forward to a future beyond the current partisan divine in which those traditions create a house in which we can all live. And I think it's incumbent upon us as citizens to engage in the constructive process of building that house. I'm not looking for Chris Christie and his vitriolic attacks to take down Trump. I'm not looking at Hutchinson. I'm not looking at others. Ramaswamy is a young guy. He may not make the grade this time, although Wednesday's debates should be interesting. He's likely to seal the show. The question is, will people give him the opportunity? Is he too young? Or here's a heterodoxical thought, Mike: is he really running to be nominated to the United States Supreme Court? Because as I was listening to his assessment of the law and the development of legal doctrines in Nation of Victims, I thought, boy, it would be fun to have him on the court. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I haven't really made my mind up, but I also don't necessarily see that there's a decision to be made quite yet. As between the two of them, I think if the vote is if we're walking into the voting booth tomorrow, my perspective is that a vote for Vivek is a vote for whomever the Democrats run right now, because Trump's base is so large.
Well, that's true too.
I'm hopeful that the two of these people, Vivek and Trump, I'm hopeful that they are able to lead those of us who have coalesced around these ideals. Vivek's vision for the future, Vivek's well-articulated plan for his presidency. I'm hopeful that there is a bridge to be built, because frankly, I don't want to choose between the two of them right now.
So Trump, Ramaswamy?
I don't know what I'm suggesting, Norm. I think I'm comfortable in this moment because I feel good about having brought Vivek's name to this stream. I feel very good about having identified certain characteristics, read and listened as much as possible, and absorbed what he had to say, and thought deeply about who I am because of who he appears to be in real time, and who and what I want out of myself and those that I work with, my clients, my friends, my family. Vivek is doing something that is almost inarticulable in terms of adding to the body and spirit of the American Republic. Those who have long been malnourished by the discourse of American politics. And as a 33-year-old millennial, I can tell you that in my lifetime, there has been no one who has appealed with this sort of unapologetic reach for what he calls revolution in the American spirit. I'm bound to that one way or the other, whether it's my vote or whether it's something else. I don't know yet. And I'm comfortable in that sort of gray area for the moment. I want him to absolutely monopolize and dominate the debate on Fox. And we know that Trump is going to sit with Tucker Carlson, and they're going to publish at roughly the same time on Wednesday.
So the New York Times suggested that Trump was still a little bit up in the air. Do you think he'll, and apparently the debate organizers have prepared a with Trump and without Trump agenda for the evening. Do you think what are the odds? What's your take? Is there no chance that Trump will appear on Wednesday?
I don't think there's any. I think Trump actually said that he won't appear on Wednesday.
Well, he did. He said a number of things on a number of occasions. If you're
real quick, T-Girl says over on Rumble, Vivek will not veep with Trump his words. I know what he said, but I also think that strategically, and we've seen this a lot, and it's a winner's mentality. T-Girl, I think you know this. You're smart enough to know this. That if you're running for first, why would you agree and negotiate your way down to second while you're running for first? I just think that it's, even if Vivek were to hypothetically become the vice presidential nominee, I wouldn't use his words against him and say, oh, whatever. You don't want, if anything, him saying, no, I'm gunning for one. I'm gunning for the number one spot is more of a reason for Trump to consider that proposition. But I also don't know that if let's say, for example, that Vivek does become part of a Trump cabinet, right? Because I don't think the reverse is necessarily true. I don't know that there is a position for Trump in a Vivek cabinet that is practical for all intents and purposes. I still question, what is Vivek's lane if that's the case, right? Because I think that his success in business dictates that he is a CEO. that he is best positioned atop an organization driving day to day, right? He's not necessarily fit for CTO or CCO, right? Or whatever it may end up being, right? What I think of Vivek is that if you may be right, Norm, that perhaps it's not necessarily a position within the cabinet that a lot of these other people are speculating. Perhaps his highest and best use is on the Supreme Court if it's not as president. But I'm not convinced that it's not as president at this point.
No, I hear you. I mean, I guess
sitting in
I'm
this
viewing him as
pushing.
having age. It's having age on his side. You know, he doesn't. You know, there's no desperation there, and I find refreshing his. You know, here's a political candidate. I mean, I'm perhaps not since Adlai Stevenson, and perhaps then that may be the answer to the question I'm posing. Have we had a president who openly talked, or a presidential candidate who openly talked about the books they were reading, and about how those books informed his, I guess in this case, his perspective on the issues of the day and where he would go based on a coherent reckoning with the American intellectual tradition. You know, as crazy as a country as we are, there are certain works that define us and certain doctrines that have united us, at least in discussion, if not in agreement on how to apply those. And, you know, what we've been lacking in recent years is sustenance. We've been reacting and reacting to claims of identity and overreacting to public events. I think of the summer of 2020 and George Floyd, and I think of the ripple effect that's had now on the January 6th prosecutions, where prosecutors are trying to pretend that this was a civil war that they need to stamp out with draconian sentences. Enough. Enough of the froth. Let's get back to the ale beneath it.
Look at this. Vivek is the only serious candidate Trump has not blasted. I think this is why, Norm, I am okay in this sort of, I call it a gray area, and it's not one of indecision. It's just a broad yes. You say Trump, yes. You say Vivek, yes. That's where I am. You say DeSantis, it's a resounding no and probably a laugh, right? And if you say any other name on that list of conservative politicians, same thing. The only person that I take seriously from the political left right now is RFK, right? But not in any way, shape, or form to the same degree that I do Vivek. And so for now, I think, because over on Rumble again, T-Girl said that he was on with Bill Maher yesterday, and according to T, quote, I do not have the temperament to be a partner. And I said to that I believe him. I believe that he doesn't have the temperament because he doesn't have time. This guy is I don't want to know what his IQ is. Maybe I do. But in terms of his accomplishment and his motor and his ambition, good Lord, who would he even, any sort of partnership proposition to Vivek would be a step down. Just
well, and that's the one thing. That's the one thing to be cautious about him. I mean, clearly he's very bright. I thought, he was, I read a fair amount, and I don't consider myself to be a dumbbell, but he left me in the dust a couple times, and I'm thinking, yeah, maybe. But, is he really saying something here? And this is one of the reasons the Constitution says, you got to be at least 35. We want people to be a little bit battle and road tested. So I am all in for Vivek as an alternative right now. And he's the guy I'm going to focus on for 2024. It's his to give away. I want to make sure that he's not more than articulate eye candy. The book that I'm listening to right now, On a Nation of Victims, it's a giant preface, and I've not really seen, and it doesn't really discuss or analyze the case or make concrete policy proposals. It's more, it's an interpretive stance as to what's gone wrong in the United States, and why we've become a nation of victims rather than a nation of underdogs. That's the contrast he makes, underdogs versus victims. Underdogs start with impossible odds and they find it within themselves to overcome them. Victims start with impossible odds and they blame others and want them to solve the problem and give them what they need. We used to be a nation of underdogs. He says we're now a nation of victims. Why? Well, in part, the equal protection jurisprudence that we've created and the notion to give heightened scrutiny scrutiny to everyone who perceives themselves to be a victim, so that they can get the benefit of the law's largesse. This has created motives for everybody to regard themselves as victims. I'm not sure I buy that analysis. That sounds to me like a law professor's wet dream, but at least it's a dream.
And what I think that demonstrates, because he's talked about this in various conversations, but in terms of his ability to know lawfully what mechanisms are available to him as an executive the day he steps in with respect to dismantling some or all of these alphabet agencies, right? These acronyms, FBI, IRS, Department of Education, the DOE, et cetera. He knows, right? Which I think that there should be extreme confidence within those that are looking at Vivek with some level of optimism, that his competitive advantage over Trump, in my opinion, is the fact that he steps in with having that practitioner's skill in his tool belt from a legal perspective. That's the one. If you're doing a side by side, I think that age isn't necessarily on his side. From a right now perspective, I think people are inherently more suspicious of younger people in politics, as they should be. And certainly we've got a 38-year-old running for the highest executive position in all of America. And I think that that's fair. That's fair criticism. But the one thing that I believe we can agree on in reflecting on the Trump presidency is his inability to wade through the quagmire of legal minutia at the point that it was pushed in front of him by sort of that bureaucratic state in DC during his first term, right? There was a lot of that, issues with getting funding for the wall, whatever we want to put on that plate. I think that what Vivek at least has as a proposition is the ability to step in on day one, anticipating what arguments will be lobbed to block any of these positions, and his counterpunch. And he's talked about, in terms of mass layoffs, that's the mechanism by which you really get rid of these agencies of their bloat, is not to make it a one by one firing or termination. It's get rid of blocks of people, right? Without respect for what they do or what they may or may not have done or who they are, right?
Well, so I'm saying, folks, take a look at Vivek, because tomorrow matters, and we need to start planning for tomorrow today. And he's the only candidate I see out there who's doing so. I don't know what kind of team he could put together to governor lead. I don't know if he'll be given the choice to do so. I may come out of retirement and actually watch a political debate on Wednesday. I haven't watched one in 12 to 15, 16 years. I'm so fed up with them all. But Vivek Ramaswamy looks like he could be the real deal. I want to just throw something out there. Maury, there's something about Vivek that creeps me. I mean, I don't know that we're going to get Ramaswamy bumper stickers in flyover country, and I hope it's not the race card or the ethnicity card that creeps you out. He is a different look. And, you want to put an end to the claims that a brown person, I don't know if he's technically brown.
Norm, I don't know. Look, I think that you're being uncharitable to people in these places. I get what you're saying practically.
I'm not being uncharitable. I'm just raising a question.
But this is the same country that elected Obama with resounding force in 2012, right? And that wasn't as if flyover country wasn't also voting for the vision that Barack Obama sold at that point. I think we would do well to remember that. Yes, racial tensions in America right now in 2023, August 21st, are extraordinarily high. I think it's a synthetic division, however. I think it's been arbitraged by the media and the establishment political operation that we have going right now. But I don't think that that's a realistic concern. If Vivek is able to reach that inflection point with name recognition, and it gives him the platform to articulate and communicate his ideas in the spirit of where he's coming from, I don't think that there's any risk that flyover country would be a detriment to him.
So Maury says, hey, it's the jutting of his jaw. I suddenly think of FDR and his cigarette holder. He seems aggressive. Well, that's okay with me. I'd rather have an aggressive president than a couch potato. Dawn points out, Dawn McNeil, evangelicals didn't vote for Romney because he's a Mormon. I don't know. Let's see how it unfolds. I think that we've come to the end of an era. We're at the end of ourselves, and
the beginning of one too, right? I think that's what we're talking about.
That's right. We've come to the end of an era which means a new one is beginning. And let's see if Ramaswamy is up to the task of leadership in the 2020s. So.
Cool deal. We've gone a little over time talking about Vivek today. Surprise, surprise. But we did have a couple of other items here. I think maybe we can slate for tomorrow. One of them was the news about Standard 208 being created by the American Bar Association. One of those, this new proposal would, I guess, mandate free expression at American law schools, which is just
and students need to be educated on its importance. There's going to be a new clothing standard too. It's going to be standard 666. Don't wear flip flops, shorts, and t-shirts to court. I mean, do we really have to teach this stuff? Really?
Unreal. We also got news that Mark Meadows has moved to dismiss the indictment against him in state of Georgia v. Meadows. So in his defense appears to rely primarily on the Supremacy Clause, as well as the First and 14th Amendments. So we will discuss that tomorrow as well, Norm.
We will, unless there's like shocking events today,
well,
space aliens, land on the White House,
Well, I'm going to start Nation of Victims today as I get a couple of moments here. I think I'm going to do the audiobook as well as you have, just because that is a much more efficient way to begin absorbing, but I'm not expecting to hear anything from him principally that I haven't already heard. So I do want to get through that so that you and I can connect a little better on the substance thereof, and then maybe we just go book by book.
Maury says, super hungry people make me suspicious. Why are you that hungry? I think that life is a gift. I think that principled life is a life devoted to making decisions, and I crave better decision making. I don't know if you'd be suspicious of me if you like, but I'll think about that overnight. I promise.
I love Pat's response to Don saying evangelicals didn't vote for Romney because he was a Mormon. And Pat says, and he was an idiot.
So. There is that. Thanks for listening to Law and Legitimacy, folks. Mike, where do folks find us, and what should they do when they do?
Yeah, we're here every morning, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Eastern. You can find us on Rumble Video when that's not messing around. YouTube Live has been very reliable, as has broadcasting live on X. If you're on X, if you're not on X, it doesn't matter. Create an X account and follow @LawPodDaily. Share the stream, subscribe, leave a like, thumbs up wherever you're getting us. And if you're listening to the audio-only version, which gets uploaded every morning directly after the stream ends, leave us 5 stars and a positive review, or leave us alone. I'll put this back on here so you know how to find us. Follow Pod Daily on X. Norm, I will see you tomorrow. Welcome back to reality.
Is this what that is? I'm hungry.
See you tomorrow.
Yes.